And we're back here with WBAI and talking about Jimmy Breslin here. And we got on the line Chick Donohue, who was he was a Sandhog for many years, and he knew Breslin because he took Breslin around for months in the tunnels, the bars, Sandhog culture. When Breslin was writing his book in the '80s, Table Money. And so, Chick, thanks for coming on today and talking about that.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Terry.
Yeah. So tell me about when Jimmy first approached you for this. I mean, for me, I knew you as the go-to guy. If you wanted to ask a question about Local 147 and the Sandhogs and what they do and that kind of thing, I would always call you. I think a lot of people did because you were like one of the main, veteran guys and that type of thing. And so Breslin got in touch with you and tell us how it went. He was writing a book and he wanted to learn about the whole culture, I guess, right?
Well, he didn't actually get in touch with me. He got in touch with Paul O'Dwyer, and he wanted to write a book on the Sandhogs, he said, and O'Dwyer introduced him to Richie Fitzsimmons, who was the business manager at the time. And Fitzsimmons called me into the Union Hall and introduced me to him and directed me to take Jimmy Breslin around to the different jobs. I tried to talk him out of it, to tell you the truth.
Why was that?
Well, at the time, he was a bit of a controversial guy amongst, firemen, cops, public civil servants in the city, of which we had a lot in Local 147. And the Local 147 was hard-working, hard-living man's world down in the tunnels. There was, they weren't generally known to the public. And it's like I equated it to being at sea. Nobody watched their language or anything like that. There was, there was no women down there. And it was kind of wide open. So I explained to Fitzsimmons, the reputation he had. And do you think it would be in the best interest that we want to show him? Fitzsimmons told me to show him everything we got. So I thought was dangerous. But Fitzsimmons says, no, I thought that might be dangerous. So Fitzsimmons says, no, he's going to write a book about us. We better be in it. So I said, okay. So I spent about 6 months with him, taking him around to job sites, gin mills where Sandhogs drank, for the union meeting, a number of places.
How was he received when you first started bringing him around?
Well, actually, he was jeered a few times in a couple of the hog houses. That's the change house.
Yeah, it's like a locker room, right? Yeah.
Well, it's more than a locker room. There's showers and there's washing machines and there's drying facilities because when they come out of the tunnel, they're usually wet, damp. And the clothing they take off, they put on chains in those days and pull it up to the ceiling, and it dries up there. So when they come back the next day, they lower it, and it was a pretty big. It's not just like a trailer, which it is today.
Washer dryer,
washers, dryers, yes.
Yeah. Coffee, fridge,
lots of coffee, whiskey on occasion.
Yeah.
Decks of cards on occasion, refrigerators, microwaves. It was a place men would spend a number of hours a day there.
Yeah, right. But just to be clear about the reception that Breslin got, I mean, we talked about this earlier on the show, that a lot of Irish in the boroughs didn't like the way he was portraying his own, in a way, drinking, Catholic, Irish and Catholic, and a lot of things he touched upon, it was kind of it cut close to the bone, and not to mention sometimes, cops and firemen and that type of thing in his columns. So a lot of people weren't enamored of him from that world, right?
I would say that's accurate.
Right. And so then how did it happen? I mean, did he take his medicine? Would he show up and just, how would he react? Or what would happen?
Oh, he was all game for it. I think it actually turned him on. I think he expected it, looked forward to it, and that's all he was. He was a gruff, tough guy, a bit of a bully sometimes, but he was all game for it. if he didn't have that talent, that talent to write, he wrote like guys would talk. He wrote distinctly different than most newspaper people. He was easy for a working stiff to read. The closest that came to me was Frank McCourt. When I read Frank's Angela's Ashes, it was amazing to me how he could write like a 6-year-old kid, and you could really see the 6-year-old kid. Breslin wrote like a rough, tough working stiff.
Right. And so, in other words, he was great. So he kind of got away with it. I mean, get away with it. I mean, yeah, the guys accepted him because he was so good, and they did read him even if they didn't like him initially or like him at all, right?
I don't think it was a real big thing that they read all his books or anything like that. I think they read his columns in the paper. You know, that was a typical paper in a hog house, the Daily News in those days. But yeah, they would push him, and he'd push back. Yeah. Which is what they expected, and to them he was normal. It was like this guy in the White House who insults people all the time.
Right.
You know, you insult him, he insults you back.
Right.
Simple.
Chick, John McDonough here. So we're talking about the book Table Money. What was the reaction when it came out, and did people see themselves in the book? And what did the Sandhogs think of the book? Did he catch it?
Well, yeah, some of them saw themselves in there. He had a character in that book who he called Sailor. There was actually a sailor, a fella who we called Sailor. His name was Kaplan, but he was the safety miner. The Sandhogs are unique. They have their own safety miner who patrols the job for safety conditions, as opposed to some government guy patrolling it or a management guy patrolling it. And Sailor was that safety miner. And then there was another guy by the name of Murray, who was the director of the Employee Assistance Program. That was again unique. It was run by the Sandhogs, for the Sandhogs. No management involvement, no government involvement, and so he combined those two guys together, Sailor and Murray. And they both did great jobs for the Sandhogs.
Yeah.
And what was the reaction from the workers about the book?
Well, hey, he's got Sailor in here, but Sailor was doing Murray's job, so you see your name in the paper or your trade in the paper or people in the paper. That was positive. And there was a lot of truth in the book. It was a tough job, tough life, tough drinking. That's why they had the program. Unsafe. That's why they had Sailor. So it was accurate. We couldn't deny that. It was accurate.
And the tone and the voice of the book, it worked, right? Him going around and doing his work and listening to how people talked and what they talked about. It worked. It really did work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he jumped in there, and I'm not going to tell them guys, I said, hey, take it easy. The union is bringing him in. He's here at our invitation, so, don't be too hard on this guy.
Yeah.
Sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't.
You mentioned about the bully thing. Tell a story about the note.
Oh, the note. I have it sitting here. I haven't seen this note in 35 years. I was supposed to meet Breslin one morning to take him someplace, I forget where. I took him around all over the city to different job sites. And I woke up one morning, and I just didn't feel like hanging out with Breslin that day. I spent the day before with him, and I just didn't feel like hanging out. So he came to my house up in the Bronx, and he knocked on the door. I was inside by myself, and I ignored him. Rang the bell, I ignored him. So he left. And about 20 minutes later, he calls me on the phone, and I answered the phone. And he said, I said, where are you? He says, I was just at your door. I said, I thought I heard someone banging on my door. That was you? He says, yeah. Where are you now? He was around the corner in a tavern called the Aqueduct, which was a Sandhog hangout.
Yeah.
I think
Aqueduct North, I think, yeah.
Yeah, it was. Aqueduct North. At the time, there was an aqueduct on Fordham.
Yeah.
This was in Woodlawn, the Woodlawn Aqueduct, Mickey Moynihan's place. Anyway, I had taken him previously to that place, and it was a Sandhog hangout, and he called me from there, and he says, we got to get to that where you promised. Okay, all right, give me 10 minutes, I'll be down, and I'll... So I did. And I spent the rest of the day with him, and I did what I was supposed to do, and as a matter of fact, that day we had some words. Just before I left him, we were in a bar in Midtown, and he said, you don't like me, do you? And I said, I don't like you. I'm no big fan of yours. Why not, he says. So I told him, I said, the way you treat cops and firemen and the Irish, you don't have many nice things to say about them. You find all of their faults and you put it in the paper. What's to like about that? So, we got along. Don't get me wrong, and that wasn't a deal breaker. I still did my job with him. But I remember leaving him and went home. And when I walked in the door, my wife says, did you see Breslin today? I says, why? She says, well, I told him. Well, what do you mean you told him? You were talking to him? I didn't know when he was at my door early in the morning that when I didn't answer the door, he wrote me a note. And I'm looking at it right now. He had one of them little pads that the press guys used to carry, rip-off pieces of paper, not too, 3 inches by 5 maybe. And it says, Wednesday morning, 9:15, Chick, you'd better be ready to describe things real good over the phone, or I will, make you the subject of the whole piece, which has to be written by 4 p.m. today, and it will be on your corner newsstand at 6 a.m. tomorrow. And he left the number. And he signed it Breslin. Never wrote Jimmy Breslin, I guess. He always just called himself Breslin to me.
Right.
Anyway, and my wife...
He was going to immortalize you in a column.
Huh?
He was going to immortalize you in a column.
Well, you see, Breslin, I always thought had a problem. He had written a column prior to this about me, and he made me sort of like a working class hero. And he's like a lot of Irish Americans I know. Once they decide that you're a good person, it's kind of hard for them to go back on that. Mm-hmm. So that gave me a license to break his chops once in a while. Mm-hmm. Because I can't be a bad guy because he decided at one time and put it in the column that I was a working class hero. So what's the
It's on the record. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm on the record. A lot of people thought he was my friend. I worked with him. He was, he was good to me, nice to me, polite to me. But I never forgave him for not thanking in the book, acknowledging the support of the union, whether Richie Fitzsimmons or the union at all, in the acknowledgments. Yeah. So I always broke his shoes about that and told him, I know you had parents, and I know they thought you had to say thank you. And every time I'd go to a spot where he knew I would be at, he wouldn't want to go near me. He'd hide somewhere in the back. But his wife enjoyed the banter that we went back and forth with, and she would say, Chicky, he's in the back room on the right there. And she'd send me right to him.
Oh, speaking of wives, what your wife did talk to him. What did she say to him and talk about the O'Neill?
She chewed his butt out. My wife's maiden name is O'Neill. And she chewed his butt out about, you write about my family in that paper, you're going to have to deal with me, and who the hell do you think you are? Something to that effect. I can't quote her exactly. But knowing the woman, that's what she would have said. And after that, every time I said, my wife's going to that thing, how is she? Give her my regards. He was so polite to my wife. I never knew anybody he was so polite to like he was to my wife.
Yeah, he felt the O'Neill wrath, right?
Yeah, he caught the God protect us from the wrath of the terrible O'Neills. He got it from him.
But
he certainly had, like Willie Mays could play baseball, Jimmy Breslin could write about blue collar guys. No doubt about it. He wrote like one.
Yeah. Okay, well, Chick, that's fabulous. That's a great commentary on him, on one facet of him, essentially. You know, I mean, everyone talks about him coming from that, you know, this blue collar and Queens and all that, but you know, that doesn't mean you can write a book about I mean, everyone has to do their research. He maybe had a head start because he kind of, you know, he comes from New York and he comes from a little, you know, that kind of background. But it sounds like it really did help inform the book that all that time he spent with you and you took him around. Oh, by the way, before we let you go, I mean, what was it like taking him around for a day or a week or a month? I mean, wherever you went, people obviously would know who he was. Would there be fireworks? Would there be drinking? What would it be like? You know, would he interview people? Would he just get into a bar and a conversation? I mean, just what was that like, you know?
Well, he sort of like sat in the side, or, you know, he sat at the bar, for instance, and he'd be what we'd say on the Erie. He would be listening to everybody's conversation. He listened more than he spoke to Sandhogs. He was a listener. I always thought that after he wrote that, at that, was it the same time, maybe right after that, I introduced Tommy Kelly to him. It must have been after that. Kelly, I introduced him to Breslin around 84, and I think the book came out in 82 or 83 or something like that. Anyway, Breslin, Kelly wrote a book about Sandhogs called Payback.
Right.
And it was similar in nature. You know, it was about all the characters, most of the characters were Sandhogs or family members of Sandhogs, and it took place in the streets and the bars and all of that. I always felt that Breslin didn't like that. He liked Kelly, and Kelly worked on his wife's first campaign for the council. So they became close, but I think he was actually jealous of Kelly writing a book about Sandhogs. Now, Kelly was a Sandhog.
Right.
Still is. Still keeps a union hook in the Sandhog.
Yeah.
Doesn't work at it, of course, but, you know, it's like getting an identification number in the Marine Corps. You always remember.
Yeah, for life. Oh, wait, so we got 2 minutes, but I want you to plug your own book. Speaking of book jealousy, Kelly told you that Breslin, that he may have dropped dead because he heard you had a book coming out. I know that was a joke, you know. I hate to joke about something like that. But what is your book is amazing. Just talk about your upcoming book for a second.
My book is named The Greatest Beer Run Ever. I did it with Joanna Malloy, who wrote for the news many years, a column Russian Malloy or Malloy and Rush.
Yeah, Russian Malloy.
And she and 1967, I buried 26 guys up in Good Shepherd Parish in northern Manhattan, and I saw a demonstration in Central Park against the boys, and it upset me, and I was up in a bar in Inwood later on that day, and one of the bartenders said, you know, somebody's got to go over there and let them kids know that we support them, and blah, 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 blah. Well, before you know it, I was volunteering to do it.
To Vietnam.
So, and I did it. So I had a list of 6 guys, and 2 of them had left by the time I got to Vietnam. But I found the other 4 from the Quang Tri down to Saigon, and it was just a goof bringing them all a beer. And,
it was a goof. How do you get to Vietnam, and how do you find them? I don't understand.
Well, I was a merchant seaman at that time. This is 1967, before water tunnels started, and I was an ex-Marine, so I still had a security clearance. So I got a job on an ammunition ship out of Leonardo, New Jersey. The ammunition in 1967 was only going to one place, and it was obviously Vietnam. So I got on the ship. I was always a union guy, so I got myself elected chairman of the crew. And 45 days later or so, we arrived in Quinnon, and I got off the ship and went looking. And by the time I got back to Quinnon, to my ship, it had sailed But then I was stuck there for a couple of months. And the day I was supposed to leave happened to be Chinese New Year's in that 1968, and I was supposed to be at the embassy at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock that morning to get a ride to the airport consulate to go to Manila to catch another ship. And that was the beginning of the Tet Offensive. So while everybody was running away from the embassy because VC took it, they occupied the embassy, I was running towards it, not knowing. But people told me I wouldn't believe it. I just kept going there. I had no place else to go.
Right, and this was the greatest beer run ever. You got a duffel bag of Pabst Blue Ribbons. You hitchhiked the ride on a merchant ship to Vietnam to bring some beer to your friends who were fighting?
Yeah.
That was like a bar bet, basically, right?
No, it was the right thing to do.
No, but I mean, it started out some bartender suggested it or something.
Yeah, well, I said it's a shame. These guys are over there. If they're watching TV and seeing these demonstrations, it's disgusting. They're over there. They're fighting for our country, and they're being peed on back here.
Yeah.
So they said, we got to get a message. We got to, send somebody over there to let them know we love them, support them, bring them a beer. So I said, I can do that.
All right. So, this is like the Deer Hunter meets Inwood bar. This is amazing. Yeah. All right.
The beautiful thing is that they're all alive.
That's great.
That's the best part of the story. They're all alive today.
And again, the book is, what's it called and when's it coming out and where can people get it?
The greatest beer run ever. It's on it. You can order it now on Amazon. It's a pre-release. It'll be shipped May 1st.
And the authors are Chick Donohue.
Chick Donohue.
And Joanna Malloy. Okay. Great. So, Chick, thanks a lot. It's great stories.
Well, listen, if you're knocking around with people like that, you're going to get some stories, man.
Yeah.
And
you just let it go. I mean, you just stay out of the way of that, man.
Yeah. Good God. On the Twitter account, you put up a post. Were those Jimmy Breslin notes?
That was the note he talked about.
Yeah,
I said, because, you hear so... Yeah, my wife still has the notes here somewhere. Go get that thing right now, And, because I was talking to him the other night. I wrote a little thing up for the Times from what he told me. And basically this similar, same type of stories. And he sent me a little picture of the note that he just read from the notebook. Chick, you better be ready. Jimmy... mad that he got stood up. I mean, rightly so. Chick didn't want to answer the door. He was there. He owns up to it. So he sent me this, this notebook with the letter, and it worked. Chick got, called the number, and he got together with Breslin that morning. So there you go.
So people can get in touch with you by to look at that note. It's on Twitter
Twitter, Corey Kilgannon, my full name, no punctuation, Corey. Kilgannon is Kilgannon. I always tell people I'm eager for story tips. Corey at nytimes.com. Just my first name, Corey at nytimes.com.
And also, if you want to get in touch with me, John McDonough, I'm at cabtivist.com, CABTIVIST, and I'll be doing my one-man play about driving a yellow cab for 40 years here in New York City, up in Newton, Massachusetts. There's a group called the Newton Nomadic Theater, and they're going to sponsor me for 2 days up in Newton, so you can go to that. Tickets actually just went on sale this morning, and one of the shows is already almost
close.
Sold out.
That's close, right?
Yeah. But you know what? There's people listening.
They can take an Uber.
And what I wanted to do is now I just got a call from the high man himself, Mr. McCourt, but I wanted to get through this story. And we're talking about 1967. And the next voice you're going to hear would be very familiar to WBAI audience. If you go to the New York Times, type in Cuba Boys, and you'll see Johnnie Sexton. Johnnie Sexton is a retired firefighter. He was one of the last firemen to get out of the Twin Towers on 9/11. But when I called him up and I said, listen, you're living in Sunnyside, just near Queens Blvd. You got to have a Jimmy Breslin story. And this ties in with that year of 1967. There's a park on 47th Street named after Tommy Noonan. And like a lot of things, you walk by these parks and you see the names of it, and you never really know who the park is named after. But Johnny, maybe you could tell us the story about how, Breslin, I heard a lot of stories, caught beatings up and down Queens Boulevard.
Yes, good morning, John. Hey, this is a historic. BAI is calling me. I call BAI.
Well, listen, Johnny, go back to Cuba and tell us the story.
I will. Where's the ticket? Come on, give me the ticket here.
We'll get Grandpa Al to buy it for you.
Yeah. But no, John, the story, let me just kind of go back a little bit. I grew up in Jackson Heights, Queens in the 90s, and I joined the service. I was in the Navy. When I got in the Navy around 76, so I came to Sunnyside, Queens on 42nd Street.
Right.
And down
That's the 90s streets, not the 1990s. Right.
Yeah. So anyway, there was a VFW at that time down the block here. So we didn't have air conditioning in none of these buildings at that time. So the thing to do during the summertime was to go down, have a couple of beers, and hang out at the VFW. So one day, it's in 1977 now, and the Son of Sam thing is starting to really rev up. And I'm in there, and I'm in the VFW, and having a beer, and I have the Daily News. So I see this guy, Mick. Mick is an Italian-American guy, but he's a World War II vet, built like Rocky Marciano. So I say, hey, Mick, you see this story? What do you think of this? Son of Sam crap. And he goes, get that paper out of here. Don't ever bring that guy in here again. I said, who are you talking about? He says, that Breslin. He's so full of you-know-what. He's this and that. Get that paper. He's making up half of these stories. I said, Nick, what's going on? What the heck is going on? So then he sits down, he tells me his story. Let me tell you about that SOB, he says. And then he went into this story that there was this kid, Tommy Noonan, from the neighborhood, 48th Avenue. He went to Vietnam, he was a Marine, and he died very heroically over there. I think he was awarded the
Medal of Honor. Yeah.
Yes. And they named a park after him. But anyway, they were having kind of a wake in the house. And it was one of these traditional Irish wakes where the women were in one side of the room saying the rosary, drinking tea, and the men were on the other side drinking, boozing it up, and lamenting and all this. And I don't know, Breslin must have got the idea. I said, let me go over, there might be a story here. So he goes in there, and I guess, I don't know what exactly he did, but a couple of days later, he writes this story that how backwards the Irish are. They've been in this country 120 years. What the hell's wrong with them? They should put down their rosary beads, put down the whiskey bottles. They should be out there protesting and joining the civil rights marches and this thing, and they should be against the war. Well, anyway, this did not go down well. Whatever he wrote did not go down well with the community over here. And one night he comes over to Burke's Bar, which used to be on 42nd and Queens Blvd. There's a Dunkin' Donuts there now. And he comes in, and there's a bunch of guys there drinking, and of course, the words are flying back and forth, and the next thing you know, they beating the crap out of Jimmy Breslin. And my friend Mickey, what happened was he used to work for delivering Rheingold beer, and he was a truck driver, and he used to deliver the kegs to the bar. And he says, that's SOB. I lost 2 days' work because I almost broke my hand over his head. They wanted just to beat the hell, and they just threw him out on 42nd Street. And that's basically the story I heard all these years. But that probably was happening around 67, 68. He was also banned from Shelley's Bar. And I was just thinking it was so amusing because they put like a lifetime ban on him. At Shelley's Bar used to be around 56, 57th Street, Woodside Avenue. And to Jimmy's credit, he outlived Shelley's Bar. Shelley's Bar went out of business about 3 or 4 years ago. So Jimmy beat the band.
That's the last laugh.
Well, listen, Johnny, I'll talk to you later. I was hoping to have more time with you, but the one and only Malachy McCourt has called in. And
you're being preempted, Johnny, is what we're saying.
By Malachy, and I think it's only fitting that you're being preempted by Malachy
So you
McCourt.
can go back to Cuba.
All right, okay. Have a good one, you guys.
Okay,
Thanks a lot.
Johnny.
Bye-bye.
So we're hearing a lot of the stories, because if you read the press, it's written by a writer's point of view and about how great a writer he was. But on today's show, you heard some of the aggravation that he gave, particularly within the Irish-American community.
Caught a beating for a column. That's journalism school there.
But to go back into that area and think there'd be no repercussions.
Well, maybe he knew. Maybe he just had the guts to...
Well, we were hoping to start off with the one and only Malachy McCourt and telling Jimmy Breslin.
The final word is always better.
And you know what, Malachy?
Hello there.
It's all yours. The final word.
The next 2.5 minutes are yours, Malachy.
Yeah, of Jimmy Breslin. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sure a lot of the stuff I've been reading about Jim is how a tough guy out there in the world, working class guy. in the middle of riots and fights and funerals and wakes and all that sort of thing. And one aspect of his life that I don't hear too much about was he was a loving family man. And I remember when Rosemary, his first wife, was dying in Lenox Hill, my mother was in there, and I would pop in and see her and have a chat with her. And but he always teased her, and she teased him, and he loved her dearly. And then he when she died, I happened to be in Boston doing a movie, and I saw she was in the hospital there. I went to see her there, and Jimmy, and she says, "Are you following me around?" You know, always on her deathbed, she still had a great sense of humor. And then, of course, the other thing which is not covered too much was the death of his two other women in his life, his two daughters that he loved dearly. Both of them died in their 40s. One died of a brain thing, and his daughter choked in a bloody restaurant on chicken or something like that. So that's one aspect. And then he has the 4 sons, and Kevin is a good friend of mine. And so that aspect of Jimmy's life was not covered. And of course, the other thing is that the most unlikely man to be called Jimmy, and you could not think of him as James Breslin, because he did not like pretension. And the thing was that he resented a lot was that so many, and being Irish descent, he just did not like the idea that so many of us forgot where we came from, and we were being pretentious, and as the Jews have Tay-Sachs, and the blacks have sickle cell, and the disease of the Irish is respectability. And he just didn't like that at all. So he was constantly on the lookout for our defects, and yet he loved people like he did love the working class. I don't know. I think you were going to have Chick Donohue on.
Yeah, we did.
And Chicky is an old friend, and he loved people like Chicky, the Sandhogs, and that is the aspect of him that's not inside this rough, tough exterior. And he was a tough man too. He was able to he could handle himself, I think, in any situation except when the odds were all against him. But he was a softy, and nobody knew his contributions to the various causes and charities that he favored. And you should hear his family talk about him, and that other aspect of him that's been missed.
Malachy, I just wanted to mention that a couple times during the show today, there were people, some of the guests had mentioned almost comparisons to Frank, in that a lot of the Irish resented that a lot of what he wrote about was so close to the bone, so close to home, that kind of thing. And I just wanted to, because I had singled this out earlier, and I just wanted to read a sentence that almost could have been, extemporized by you on this very show, that Jimmy wrote in one of his columns, there was some corruption attached to the St. Patrick's Day parade. So the column on March 17th of whatever year this was, he says, and I'm quoting in part of the sentence, "There will be 100,000 Irishmen, their chests stuck out almost as far as their stomachs, their snub noses as high in the air as a man can get his nose. And they will be marching up Fifth Avenue, and you can take all of them and stand them on their heads to get some blood into the skull for thinking, and then you can put them back on their feet, and you will not be able to get an original phrase out of the lot of them." I mean, I just thought of you when I read that, just hitting back at his own, like, and so fiercely,
Yeah.
Whatever had caused it. There was some corruption with the parade committee.
Yeah, well, they forgot. The only thing they write these days are insurance policies, and that's about the extent of the literary endeavors of so many of them. They are they're into, and it is the Irish poet A.E. George Russell said, "You eventually become the thing you hate the most," and that's what they forget that Benedict Arnold was a conservative. They forget George III was a conservative. We had 800 years of conservative rule in Ireland, and yet these people are saying, "I am." Would you ever hear these guys saying, I'm a fiscal conservative? When they say that, they look like they have a very severe case of constipation, the look of pain on their faces. So that's the kind of thing. And that's pretension, respectability, and that kind of rubbish were the things that distress. And he didn't hate anything. He was incapable of hate. But he did dislike a lot of those aspects of our character that we have descended to, and I don't know why we have gone down so low as to pretend to be conservative.
Well, Malachy, more important, will you be in the saddle next week here at WBAI?
I am coming back. I just saw the doc, and I'm okay. I have to go. I'm actually going to Jimmy's. The funeral mass. They asked me not to say where it is because they're a bit apprehensive about overcrowding and so forth. So I'm going to get there for that. But anyway, yes, I'm much better, and I will be there. Of course, I will. And thanks a lot, John. Thanks, Corey.
Yeah.
And there's Michael
feel
there.
Better, Malachy.
Yeah, Michael's G's there. Yeah.
Good. And you were going to have Ginger on.
We did. We already did.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, my God.
She's picking up the mantle of Jimmy Breslin and talking about that poor woman that was killed at the EMT up in the Bronx.
My God,
that would have been a story right up his alley.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. All right, then, my dears.
Yes.
We will talk later.
Yeah.
Well, Corey, that was some tribute to Breslin. I mean, it wasn't all, he was the greatest writer ever. It talked about, he got himself in situations that were crazy. I mean, to walk into Burke's Bar after a column like that, I mean, and this is 67, it would have been that heavy anti-war at that stage. I mean, you're heading towards it. But to go in and think, or maybe he did think, I'm going to catch a beating or I'll give one. I don't know. I mean,
yeah, I'm glad. He wouldn't have liked all this pious eulogizing. I mean, he was a guy of many. It was a very complicated time in New York. He wrote about it, and he wrote about it very complex stuff and in a mixed way.
Yeah. Well, Michael G., the man himself, will be back in the saddle here next week, and we'll probably continue. Hopefully, no one will die this week, and we'll have a regular show. Won't be eulogizing.
No one died this week.
Yes, please. We're putting that out there.
Lights is blinding. Girls need blinders so they could step out of bounds.